There are 10,000 ways to die in the 41st millennium, and not a single way to truly live. On Cadia, you learn that before you can even speak. The fortress world skies are never still, defense lasers trace the horizon like iron rain, and the faint shimmer of the eye of terror stains the night with purple light. My mother used to say that if you stared at it long enough, you could hear the whispers of the damned. I stopped looking at the sky when I was 8. I was born in the Hablocks of Kazar Croffin, where children learned to strip a lost gun before they could read. Our toys were empty shell casings. Our lullabies, the thunder of orbital drills. We were Cadians, bred for discipline, trained for death, and taught that hesitation was heresy. The priests of the Schola Progenium said we were the emperor's wall against the storm, and every wall must be built from stone, not flesh. I remember my first drill. The instructor, a veteran named Sergeant Vallon, barked orders until the air itself trembled. "The heretic won't wait for you to feel ready," he said. "You're either prepared to die, or you're already dead." I thought it was just a saying back then. I hadn't yet watched a friend fall with a hole through his chest. I hadn't smelled burned promethium in the wind. My father was a Vox operator in the 8th Cadian, killed during the second siege of Cadia. His lost gun and his regiment patch were all that came home. I wore them when I trained, not for glory, but to remember that even in death, service doesn't end. Cadia didn't mourn its dead. It recycled their duty into the next generation. We lived under curfew lights and gunmetal skies. Even leisure was regimented. At 14, I was sent to the Youth Militarum, where our squad was expected to march 5 clicks before breakfast and recite the catechisms of hate before sleep. We learned to clean our lost guns with rags of torn uniforms, because even cleaning supplies were for soldiers at the front. The war never truly left Cadia. It just waited for more bodies to feed it. The eye of terror hung above us like a god's wound, bleeding nightmares into our dreams. Sometimes the astropaths would scream during the night drills, clutching their heads and muttering about the shifting gaze. We didn't ask questions. On Cadia, curiosity was just another path to madness. Our commissars told us the emperor shielded those who obeyed, and that was enough. At 16, I made my first shot at a moving target, a steel servitor drone that simulated heretic combat patterns. I hit it 3 times in the chest and once in the neck, burning through its casing. The instructor nodded once and said, "You'll serve." That was the closest thing to praise anyone received on Cadia. We were told stories of those who failed, units that broke under pressure, men who fled the line. Their names were erased, their families reassigned to penal work details. On Cadia, legacy was everything, and disgrace was worse than death. You either served with honor, or you didn't serve at all. Still, there were moments, rare, flickering, when I'd watch the aurora over the polar defenses and imagine a galaxy beyond endless war. But those thoughts were luxuries, and luxuries were weakness. I learned to bury them beneath faith and fire drills. By the time I was 17, I could field strip a lost gun blindfolded, quote the Tactica Imperialis by heart, and run a kilometer in full flak gear without faltering. We didn't call it strength. We called it survival. Cadia doesn't raise heroes. It raises soldiers. And soldiers don't dream, they obey. When the recruitment orders came through the Vox, none of us flinched. We were Cadians, born to the gun. We'd been waiting for this our whole lives. The transport bay reeked of machine oil and incense. We lined up in perfect formation. 50 young men and women of Cadia's 8th Regiment, clean uniforms, cold eyes, hearts pounding beneath flak. Commissar Hark stood before us like a statue of judgment, his greatcoat hanging heavy with medals that might as well have been chains. He recited the oath of service in a voice sharp enough to cut steel, and we repeated every word as if the syllables themselves were sacred rounds, chambered in our throats. "I serve the Emperor of mankind," I said, hand to chest, lost gun at my side. "My life is his to command, my death his to give." When the brand touched my shoulder, the Achilles seared into flesh. The pain wasn't agony. It was clarity. For the first time, I felt part of something greater than myself. The drill instructors called it faith. The veterans called it denial. But either way, it burned deeper than the mark itself. Afterward, we received our standard issue gear, flak armor, lost gun, bayonet, a battered pack containing rations and a devotional pamphlet titled Fortitude in the Emperor's Service. The text was already smudged with fingerprints and blood. Everything in the guard had history. Every weapon, a legacy. My lost gun bore 3 small etchings near the power pack slot, kills from some forgotten Guardsman. I traced them with a thumb and whispered, "I'll add more." That night, the chaplain of the 8th spoke to us from the vox horns across the mustering field. His voice, distorted by distance and static, was more machine than man. "You are Cadians, the wall between mankind and damnation. The heretic, the mutant, the alien, all will break upon your guns. You do not retreat. You do not fail. You die standing, as your fathers did." Around me, no one moved. No one breathed. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The next morning, we marched to the parade ground beneath the shadow of a Valkyrie gunship, its engines screaming hymns of iron. There was a pride there, cold, sharp, almost painful. Watching the Cadian colors ripple under the pale sun, I thought of my father's unit. They had stood where I now stood. They had sworn the same oath, fired the same rifles, faced the same abyss. During training, I had imagined this day 100 times. I thought I'd feel triumph. Instead, I felt a strange emptiness, as if some part of me had already died and was watching from afar. The regiment's commander, Colonel Travis, addressed us from the platform. His voice was steady, stripped of emotion, honed by decades of service. "You are now guardsmen of the Astra Militarum. You will be sent to worlds that will never remember your names. You will fight wars whose victories will be forgotten before the blood dries. You will suffer, bleed, and die, and you will call it duty." He paused, letting the silence settle like dust. "But remember this, Cadia stands. As long as you live, the fortress world endures." The words rippled through us like a second heartbeat. Cadia stands. Every Cadian knew the phrase. It wasn't just a motto. It was defiance made flesh. Later, inside the barracks, the atmosphere softened. Jokes, nervous, dry, soldiers' humor, began to surface. We shared names, ranks, and lies about where we'd served before. My bunkmate, Arlen, claimed his uncle once shot a Chaos Space Marine in the knee with a lucky lost burst. We all laughed because we needed to. Before lights out, I cleaned my lost gun. Each motion was ritual. Check the power pack, inspect the barrel, whisper the machine spirit's benediction. Sergeant Valen passed by and nodded, eyes sharp but approving. "Keep your weapon closer than your faith," he said. "Both will keep you alive, if you treat them right." I slept little that night. The barracks lights dimmed, leaving only the faint glow of purity seals fluttering against the walls. Outside, the orbital defense cannons thundered faintly, practicing for wars we hadn't yet seen. I dreamed of battlefields, fire, and ruin, and awoke to the sound of the morning horn. Departure day came like a sentence fulfilled. The airfields of Kazar Crofen burned with activity, columns of tanks, rows of marching soldiers, transports belching smoke into the void. The Emperor's war machine never slept. We boarded our troopship, St. Drusus Wrath, through rusted loading ramps, helmets under arms. The air inside was metallic, recycled, alive with the hum of plasma coils. I found my seat beside Arlen and a veteran named Mediger, an older man with the weary eyes of one who had already seen too much. He noticed the tremor in my hand and gave a grim smile. "First deployment?" "Yes, sir." He snorted. "Stop calling me sir. You'll see what it's really like soon enough. The Emperor doesn't send prayers to the front, just bodies." The ship shuddered as the engines roared to life. Outside the viewport, Cadia receded, the world of my birth shrinking to a pale dot beneath. The black sea of stars. A strange ache filled my chest, not fear, but something deeper. I had sworn to die for the Emperor, but leaving Cadia felt like dying already. As the stars elongated into streaks and the ship slipped into the warp, the Vox crackled once more with Colonel Travis's voice. "Cadians, remember who you are. You were born on the world that stands against hell itself. You do not falter. You do not fear. You are the wall." The men cheered. I didn't. I just gripped my lost gun tighter and whispered my father's name. In the distance, through the viewing slit, the eye of terror pulsed faintly, like something vast and awake, waiting for us. The Emperor's call had been answered. Now, it was time to see what it demanded in return. The first thing you learn aboard a troopship is that silence means Something's gone wrong. The St. Drusus. Wrath was never quiet. There was always the hum of plasma coils, the low thrum of the Geller field, the distant echo of boots on deck plates. It was a living machine, ancient and pious, carrying 30,000 souls toward the front lines. Our days fell into rhythm, drills, maintenance, and prayer. We weren't soldiers yet, just potential. The veterans called this the purification period. Every morning began with the litany of service, recited before the shrine of the ship's machine spirit. The engine seers, red-robed and faceless, moved among us like ghosts, anointing consoles with sacred oils and checking Auspex readings for warp irregularities. My section trained under Sergeant Valen again. Fate or punishment. I couldn't tell which. His voice could cut through the roar of a Valkyrie engine. "You'll live or die by what you remember here," he barked. Out there, hesitation gets you a bolt round between the eyes. And that's the merciful way to go. We drilled for hours, lost gun formations, field reloads, melee practice with bayonets against armored servitors. Sweat slicked the decks, and blood wasn't uncommon. When someone collapsed, Medicae crews patched them up with stims and sent them back. The Emperor demanded endurance, and on Cadia, endurance was worship. I found comfort in the repetition. Every precise motion, every shouted order, dulled the gnawing thought that soon we'd be fighting real enemies. During marksmanship sessions, my aim drew Valen's rare approval. "Steady hands," he muttered. "You'll be the one covering our retreat. Someday." I didn't know if he meant it as a joke. During downtime, what little we had, I cleaned my weapon and read from the Imperial Infantryman's uplifting primer. The book was half scripture, half propaganda, and all mandatory. It promised that lost guns could pierce orc armor, that the Emperor personally guided our aim. Even as a child of Cadia, I knew better. But sometimes, lies were easier to believe than the truth. The troopship shuddered often as it passed through the warp. The Geller field flickered once, just once, and the lights dimmed to red. I swear I heard something move beyond the hull. Something vast brushing against reality. The engine seers chanted louder, their metallic voices joining in binary hymns. The sound faded. The field stabilized. No one spoke of it. Still, rumors spread. A guardsman in the lower decks claimed he saw faces in the coolant mist. Another said the Vox operator woke screaming, her ears bleeding from a whisper that no one else could hear. We laughed it off, but even laughter sounded thin under the crimson glow of the emergency lumen strips. Still with us in the darkness? Valen growled one evening as we assembled for inspection. "Good. The warp's the Emperor's sieve. It shakes out the weak. If you're still breathing, you're worth the rations." On the 12th day, the Commissar addressed us over the Vox. Prepare for real environment. Simulation. That meant one thing. Combat drills with live fire. The practice range transformed into a mock battlefield. Cover bunkers. Smoke grenades. Auto turrets firing low-power rounds. The drill was simple. Squad Epsilon, my unit, had to breach a fortified position while under simulated suppressive fire. I led the forward charge. Low, fast, efficient, just as Valen taught. Arlen took the left flank, covering with precise loss bursts. We advanced in textbook formation, clearing targets with practiced precision. When the smoke cleared, our squad stood alone. 3 other teams had been wiped from combat. Valen grunted approval. "You fought like Cadians," he said. "Now remember, next time, the enemy shoots back for real." That night, I dreamed of the planet we were heading toward. Vortex 9. Rumors said it was an industrial world gone silent. Vox interference, garbled astropathic signals. A single distress code. Faith holds. The officers said it was probably rebellion or Xeno's interference. But the veterans exchanged looks when they thought we weren't watching. Looks that said, chaos. Meditor, the old guardsman, leaned over his bunk and muttered, "Don't think about what waits on Vortex. Think about your trigger pull, your formation, your breathing. The moment you start thinking beyond that, the warp's already got you." I nodded, though I didn't sleep again. Outside the portholes, the stars burned wrong, like eyes, patient and watching. 3 days later, the klaxon screamed. Warp translation in 1 hour. We assembled in the drop bay, helmets on, gear checked. The smell of machine oil and fear filled the air. Valen moved among us, tightening straps, muttering prayers to the Emperor under his breath. "Remember your oaths. he said. Remember, Cadia. And remember, you are not allowed to die until I give the Emperor permission to take you. When the warp bled away and real space snapped into being, we saw it for the first time. Vortex 9, shrouded in storm clouds. Half its surface burning. 1,000 Vox channels filled with static and screaming. Valen whispered, "Welcome to the Guard, boys." The training was over. The war had begun. The moment we saw Vortex 9, every story we'd heard about war became small and childish. From orbit, the world looked wounded, a ball of smoke and flame. Its atmosphere crackling with lightning that shimmered in unnatural hues. Vox chatter filled our helmets. Overlapping orders and distress calls, most of them ending mid-sentence. No one said the word chaos, but we all felt it. Inside the drop bay, the light turned amber. The klaxons howled. Commissar Hark walked the rows of Cadians with his bolt pistol drawn, the way one might walk through a garden of explosives. "You are the Emperor's fist," he barked. "You will strike with purity. You will not falter. You will not fear. And should you do either," he raised the pistol slightly, "you will be redeemed." The Valkyries roared to life. The deck trembled beneath us as magnetic clamps released. The ramp lowered. Wind and ozone slamming into us as the vast blackness of orbit yawned below. Sergeant Valen's voice cut through the chaos. 8th Regiment. Squad Epsilon, embark. Move like you mean it. We ran. Boots hit metal. Armor clanked. Lost guns locked to harnesses. I felt my heartbeat sink with the thrum of the engines. Arlen gave me a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "First drop," he said. "Emperor willing, not the last." The Valkyrie shuddered as we descended through the storm. Red lightning clawed across the clouds, illuminating the world below. Through the viewing slit, I saw burning spires, shattered manufactorums, and rivers of molten slag. The Vox crackled again, snippets of desperate messages. Engagement near Hive Gate. Traitor armor in Sector 9. Emperor, forgive us. They're inside the walls. The pilot's voice came through, cold and clipped. Brace for turbulence. Atmospheric interference is off the charts. We hit the upper atmosphere like a hammer. The hull screamed. The G-forces crushed against my chest. And for a heartbeat, I thought the Emperor himself was testing our faith. Then, through the storm, tracer fires streaked upward. Someone down there was shooting at us. Evasive maneuvers. The pilot yelled. The Valkyrie swerved hard. Something exploded to port. Another transport, vaporized mid-drop. The blast rocked us sideways, alarms blaring. The smell of ozone filled the cabin. "Stay focused," Valen shouted over the din. "This is what you trained for." When we broke through the clouds, the city came into view, Hive Magnus, or what was left of it. Entire sectors burned. Anti-air guns flared from the ruins, shells bursting in blossoms of light. A manufactorum spire had collapsed across the main thoroughfare, its iron skeleton jutting like the bones of a dead god. Touchdown in 10. The ramp blew open, the roar of the engines deafening. The Valkyrie hovered just meters above the cracked ferrocrete. Valen leapt first, landing hard, lost gun ready. The rest of us followed, boots striking ground slick with ash and blood. The first thing that hit me was the heat. The second was the smell, burned oil, metal, and something else beneath it. Something human. "Form up," Valen bellowed. We took cover behind a wrecked Chimera transport. Rounds pinged off the hull. Somewhere in the haze, silhouettes moved. Enemy shapes, indistinct but fast. Return fire. My lost gun barked red beams into the smoke. Shapes fell. Others didn't. Arlen shouted. "Contact's left flank," and swung his weapon, firing short bursts. Meditor threw a frag grenade into the haze. The explosion illuminated. The enemy for a fraction of a second, twisted. Figures in tattered Cadian armor. Faces mutilated and symbols carved into their flesh. Traitors. The word hit me harder than any bullet. These had once been men of Cadia, guardsmen, like us. Their armor bore the same aquilas, now defaced with 8-pointed stars. "Heretics," Valen roared. "Purge them." We did. The firefight lasted less than 3 minutes. The smoke cleared, and all that remained were bodies. Ours and theirs. I stared at one corpse, its eyes still open, a crude sigil burned into its chest. For a heartbeat, I thought I recognized the face. Then I realized I was just seeing my own reflection in his visor. After the engagement, the squad regrouped. We'd lost 3, burnt, shredded, or worse. Valen called in coordinates for a forward rally point. The Vox crackled again. Command was fragmentary, confused. Entire regiments had vanished in the descent. Vox distortion screamed with background static, words echoing out of sync. "Emperor preserve us," Arlen muttered. Valen gave him a look that could freeze lava. "The Emperor doesn't preserve, Guardsman. He expects. Get moving." We pushed through the ruins, stepping over corpses, some human, some not. The city was dead, but not empty. In the distance, something howled. Not mechanical, not animal. Something that didn't belong in reality. By the time we reached the rally point, night had fallen. The sky bled red from fires that never died. Command's Vox burst through at last. All surviving Cadian units, consolidate and prepare for siege. Enemy presence confirmed as heretical in origin. This world is lost. Hold positions until reinforcement or death. Cadia stands. Arlen looked at me and whispered, "Reinforcement or death. Guess which comes first?" I didn't answer. I just reloaded and stared into the burning city, where the shadows moved like they were alive. We were no longer trainees. We were Cadians, and our war had just begun. The siege began before dawn, though dawn was a generous word for the kind of light that passed through the poisoned sky of Vortrex 9. The storms never stopped. Red lightning flickered over the ruins, casting the city in pulses of hellish light. Somewhere above, orbital debris still fell from the fleet that hadn't made it through. The Emperor's judgment rained down as burning steel. We dug in among the shattered hab blocks and manufactorum wreckage, turning every street into a kill zone. Sandbags, razor wire, improvised barricades. Valen made us build defenses until our hands bled. "The Emperor doesn't protect walls," he said. "He protects men who make them worth defending." Every guardsman knew how to turn rubble into fortification. The moment the orders came, discipline kicked in like instinct. We established firing arcs, laid out ammunition caches, checked Vox channels for signals. I was assigned to a forward post, a three-man observation team, overlooking the main avenue that led to Hive Magnus' ruined gates. The Auspex scanners hummed with static. The air itself seemed alive, thick with dust and psychic interference. Arlen sat beside me, wiping soot from his visor. "You think they're coming back?" he asked. "They never stopped," I said. He managed a hollow laugh. "Guess that's Cadia for you." Before I could answer, the Vox sputtered to life. "Contacts inbound. Grid Sector 17 Alpha. Armor signatures confirmed. Hold the line." Meteor leaned over the scope. "Traitor armor. At least 3 Lehman Russ chassis. Emperor help us." Valen's voice came through over the channel. "Squad Epsilon. Prepare for armor engagement. Croc teams to position. Fire on my mark." The first shells hit seconds later. Massive concussive blasts that tore apart our barricades. The world shook. Dust poured from the ruins above as debris rained down. I ducked behind a collapsed column, clutching my lost gun. The air burned hot enough to sear flesh. "Return fire," Valen shouted. Our heavy weapons team opened up, autocannons spitting rounds that sparked off the enemy tank's armor. The roar was deafening. The sky turned red from muzzle flash and flame. Through the smoke, I saw the enemy infantry advancing, former guardsmen, their armor painted in crude sigils, their faces hidden behind rebreathers. They moved with the same discipline we did. Traitors, yes, but Cadians once. Rage burned through my fear. "For Cadia," I screamed, firing burst after burst into the advancing line. Lost fire lit the air like rain. Arlen joined in, his shots precise, measured. One after another, traitors fell, their corrupted banners trampled into the mud. Then came the tanks. A corrupted Lehman Russ rolled forward. Its hull warped, cannon barrel twisted like bone. A monstrous symbol of the dark gods pulsed on its side, bleeding light. The machine shouldn't have moved, but it did. "Emperor preserve us," Arlen whispered. "Focus," Valen yelled. "Croc team, fire." The rocket hissed from the launcher. Streaking through the air, a perfect shot. It struck the tank dead center. For a moment, hope surged. Then the explosion died too quickly, as if swallowed. The tank kept coming. Second shot. Reloading. The Lehman Russ fired. The shell obliterated the barricade beside us, vaporizing 3 men. My ears rang. The world turned white. When the sound came back, it was chaos, shouting, screaming. The static roar of the Vox filled with overlapping prayers and orders. I grabbed my lost gun, pushed up from the dirt, and kept firing. Training took over. Aim, fire, correct. Aim, fire, correct. It didn't matter that every shot barely scorched the enemy armor. The act itself kept me sane. Finally, Meditor managed to reload. Croc ready. Do it. The second missile found its mark. The tank erupted in a bloom of fire and black smoke. Shrapnel rained down, sizzling in the ash. For a heartbeat, the line held. Then, the screaming began. Not the humankind. This was different, like metal tearing, like the warp itself wailing. The wrecked tank twisted, its fire burning green now. Shapes moving inside the flames. I saw faces, too many, too wrong. Something was coming through. Back! Fall back! Valen roared. That's not of this world. We scrambled through the ruins, lost guns firing blindly into the smoke. Behind us, the wreck of the tank split open, spilling something that shouldn't exist. Limbs, flesh fused with steel, dragging themselves through the fire. We reached the secondary line, gasping. Commissar Hark stood waiting, his bolt pistol raised. Hold your ground, he shouted. There is no retreat from duty. He strode past us toward the advancing horror. With perfect calm, he fired his pistol once, a single blessed bolt shell. The creature detonated in a burst of light and gore, its scream vanishing into silence. For a moment, everyone just stared. Then Valen spoke quietly. The Emperor protects. We spent the rest of the night reinforcing the line, our hands shaking, eyes on the horizon. The traitors didn't return, but their shadows lingered in every corner. At dawn, the Vox crackled again. Command to all surviving units. Enemy forces regrouping. Prepare for prolonged siege. Reinforcements delayed. Cadian stands. I looked at Arlen. He didn't say anything. He just nodded, expression hollow. The siege wasn't ending. It was only just beginning. And deep beneath the ruined hive, something was moving. The second day of the siege began with silence. The kind that only exists after too much screaming. Smoke hung low over the ruins, and the sky flickered between red and black as the storm front rolled overhead. The air stank of promethium, blood, and ozone. We'd buried what was left of the first wave during the night. Though buried meant stacking corpses behind the walls to block incoming fire. There were too many bodies and not enough time for graves. Sergeant Valen walked the line like a specter, checking positions, adjusting aim points, barking orders. He never seemed tired, though I knew he hadn't slept since the drop. The commissar had set up his command post in what used to be a chapel. From its broken archway, a tattered imperial banner still clung to the wind, defiant against the storm. By mid-morning, Vox reports began filtering through, traitor forces massing in the lower city. The auspex flickered with interference, images distorting, heat signatures multiplying. Arlen nudged me. You think they'll hit us again today? They never stopped, I muttered. They're just waiting for us to think they did. Valen overheard. Good instincts, Guardsman. That's how you live longer than one deployment. If only I'd believed him. At midday, the Emperor's wrath came. The first artillery strike hit A. Click north, a shockwave. So violent it ripped through the walls. Dust and debris filled the air as a second barrage followed, closer this time. The ground shook, Vox Channel screamed. Valen's voice cut through the static. All squads, brace for contact. They're coming through the Manufacturum district. Through the haze, we saw them. A tide of traitor infantry, marching in broken formation. Banners of black and brass fluttering above. Their armor gleamed with fresh corruption. Cadian green and silver turned sickly with warp-borne growths. Behind them, hulking silhouettes moved, shapes too large and twisted to be human. Emperor's blood. Meditor breathed. They've brought demon engines. A defiler, one of the hell machines of the Dark Mechanicum, tore through the wreckage, its bladed limbs cutting apart a collapsed wall like paper. It roared, a sound made of tortured metal and souls. The Vox immediately filled with screams from other sectors. Valen didn't hesitate. All heavy teams, target the walker. Bring it down. Las cannons flared. The beams struck true, but barely slowed the beast. It retaliated with a blast from its cannon arm, vaporizing an entire squad in an instant. The air filled with orders, prayers, and the roar of lost fire. Every guardsman fired until the barrels of our rifles glowed. Arlen's shots were perfect, clean, disciplined, Cadian through and through. I watched him take down a charging heretic at 50 meters with a single burst. Competence wasn't a gift out here. It was survival's only proof. But the enemy kept coming. I switched my power pack, firing until my shoulder ached. Valen moved like a machine, directing squads, calling coordinates, tossing grenades with perfect precision. Even under fire, he never broke rhythm. When the defiler reached the outer barricade, its claws impaled a Cadian trooper through the chest and flung him like a rag doll. Hark strode into the open, cloak whipping in the storm, bolt pistol raised. In the Emperor's name, he roared and fired. Each shell detonated in bursts of divine fire against the demon engine's carapace. Still it advanced. Valen pointed. Croc team now. The rocket struck the defiler square in the joint. The explosion ripped through its frame. For a moment, the monster staggered, then collapsed, burning. The cheering that followed was brief, choked off by the realization that the traitors hadn't stopped advancing. Wave after wave crashed against us. The air shimmered with heat and terror. I remember the moment I stopped thinking of them as people. Once you see a man screaming the names of demons while his flesh writhes like wax, you can't call him human anymore. Hours blurred into eternity. We fought until our packs were empty, until the barrels of our lost guns hissed with steam. When command finally called retreat to the secondary line, we fell back in groups, covering each other's movement with disciplined bursts. The retreat wasn't chaos. It was art. Every step, every shot, was measured. That's what it meant to be Cadian, to die in perfect formation. We regrouped at the Hablocks 2 sectors west. The wounded filled the hallways, and the Medicae were already running out of supplies. The Vox buzzed with fragmentary orders. Defensive line Sigma breached. Fall back to Hive Core. Emperor preserve us. Valen stood at the window, watching the fires burn. We can hold another day, he said, almost to himself. After that, he didn't finish. Arlen sat beside me, silent, staring at the barrel of his rifle. I could tell what he was thinking because I was thinking it too. We'd trained our whole lives for this. And yet, no training could prepare you for how endless it all felt. The fighting, the dying, the waiting to die. That night, lightning struck the Manufactorum spire again and again, each flash illuminating the endless tide of enemies still gathering in the streets. Meteor muttered a prayer I'd never heard before. It wasn't from the primer. It was older, quieter. When he finished, he looked at me. The Emperor doesn't save soldiers, he said. He remembers them. Outside, the defiler's corpse twitched once, a sound like metal tearing, followed by silence. None of us slept. By the third day, the siege had eaten away every illusion of hope. We no longer spoke of victory, only endurance. The city had become a graveyard of concrete and ash. Each building was a bunker, every street a corridor of death. The air shimmered with heat from the endless bombardment, and the horizon never stopped burning. The guard had held worse lines before, but something about Vortrex 9 was wrong. It wasn't just the enemy, it was the ground itself. The earth hummed under our boots, vibrating with a frequency that didn't belong to any machine. The Auspex readings were nonsense. Radiation spikes one moment, psychic distortion the next. Command said it was warp interference from the traitor artillery. But deep down, we all felt it. Something beneath the city was awake. I was stationed in the upper levels of a collapsed manufactorum, a sniper's perch with a view over the outer district. Through the broken glass, I could see the traitors massing again, hundreds of them, banners raised, chanting words that hurt to hear. Arlen crouched beside me, adjusting the long loss. If we survive this, drinks are on you, he said, forcing a grin. If we survive this, I replied, you can have my rations and my bedroll too. Below us, Valen coordinated the defense. Every surviving squad was redeployed. Trenches dug through rubble. Heavy bolters positioned in narrow lanes. Flommers set up to cover choke points. There was a rhythm to the preparation, the kind that comes from repetition, not optimism. Hark arrived soon after, his uniform immaculate despite the soot and grime. His presence alone stiffened every spine. The enemy will test our faith again today, he announced, voice cutting through the din of rain and distant thunder. They believe we are weak. Show them the Emperor's truth, that faith is stronger than flesh. His words didn't inspire us. They anchored us. Faith wasn't hope. It was duty carved into the bone. The assault began at midday. The enemy came through the smoke like a tide of shadows, their eyes glowing behind cracked visors. Our guns spoke in unison, lost fire, bolter shells, the dull thump of grenade launchers. The manufactorum floor shook with the rhythm of war. Arlen picked off advancing traitors with calm precision. Each shot hit true. Chest, head, throat. I covered his flank, focusing on the ones with heavy weapons. It was methodical, almost mechanical. That's how you stay alive. You stop thinking, stop feeling. You work. The first wave died screaming. The second wave tripped over their corpses. But the third didn't fall. They weren't human anymore. Flesh twisted under their armor, limbs stretching too far, faces melting into something else. Demonic whispers hissed through the vox. Valen's voice barked over the comms. All squads, those are corrupted. Aim for the head and the heart. Don't let them close. I switched to overcharge mode. The las gun kicked like a mule, each shot leaving a hole the size of a fist. Still, they kept coming. Then the vox howled, a feedback scream that dropped us all to our knees. Lights flickered, and every Auspex screen turned black. Through the static, a voice whispered. Not words exactly, just a sound like laughter, deep and wet and endless. The manufactorum doors burst inward. Something enormous stepped through the smoke. At first, I thought it was another defiler. But then it moved, too fluid, too alive. The air around it shimmered, bending light like heat distortion. A demon prince. The creature's voice was a thunderclap wrapped in silk. Cadians, how noble you are, how faithful, how easily you break. Every man who heard it froze for a heartbeat too long. That was all it needed. The demon struck, claws like swords tearing through a squad in one motion. Fire, Valen shouted. All weapons. Bring it down. Heavy bolters roared, tearing chunks of corrupted flesh. Plasma fire seared through its armor. The thing staggered but didn't fall. It laughed, a sound that made blood run from our ears. Hark charged forward. By the Emperor's will, I cast thee down. He fired his bolt pistol, each shot a flare of faith. Then, with a battle cry that shook the walls, he drew his power sword. The blade met the demon's claw in a burst of light. Sparks danced like fireflies. The commissar's expression was pure fury and pure devotion. We poured fire into the creature, every guardsman screaming prayers as they fired. Finally, Hark drove his blade into its chest. The demon shrieked, its form unraveling in a storm of black flame. The light devoured it, the sound tearing through the air until silence. Only Hark remained standing, his armor smoking, his eyes hollow. He turned to us. The Emperor's light burns eternal, he said quietly. But so does the shadow. Then he collapsed. Valen reached him first, checking for life. He's breathing, he said. Barely. Get the medici. We carried the commissar back behind the lines, his pulse weak, his face pale. The battle raged on around us, but none of us would forget that moment. Because when we looked back at where the demon had fallen, the ground was still burning. A symbol had been scorched into the stone, a sigil none of us recognized. It pulsed faintly, as if alive. Valen ordered it sealed off. No one touches it. No one looks at it. Not without the blessing of the priesthood. That night, even the storm quieted, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Arlen whispered, maybe we broke it. No, I said. We woke it. The fourth day dawned in red. Not sunrise. There hadn't been one since the fleet burned. But from the horizon itself, glowing with unnatural fire. The manufactorum still smoldered, smoke rising like incense to a dead god. We could smell the demon's ashes in the air, like burnt iron and rot. Valen gathered what remained of the company before dawn. 2 platoons worth of men had been reduced to fewer than 50. Their armor was scorched, eyes hollow, uniforms unrecognizable beneath soot and blood. But they still stood at attention. The commissar lives, Valen said. He's unconscious, but stable. His fight bought us another day. We'll make it count. No one cheered. We just nodded, like men being told they'd have to keep breathing for a while longer. Arlen and I were reassigned to the recon detail, a death sentence disguised as duty. Our orders: sweep the lower catacombs beneath the manufactorum. The Auspex readings there had gone wild since the battle. Something down there was interfering with communications. We took a 5-man team and descended through the shattered access tunnels. The air grew colder the deeper we went, thick with dust and a faint metallic tang. Our lumen lamps cast narrow cones of light that seemed to vanish too soon, swallowed by the dark. Feels wrong down here, Meditor muttered, clutching his rifle tight. It's the warp's stink, Arlen said. Demonic residue. Don't breathe too deep. I kept my Vox tuned to Valen's channel, though the signal was already fading. Sergeant, this is Recon 3. Entering sublevel 2. No contact yet. Static. Then, copy that. Keep your eyes open. Those tunnels run beneath the old shrine sector. There may be relics, or worse. He wasn't wrong. The catacombs were lined with ancient statues, saints, martyrs, imperial heroes, their faces eroded by centuries of dust. Candles long since burned out clung to their bases. Some of the statues had been defaced, their features scratched away by claws or knives. As we moved deeper, the walls began to change. The stone warped, melted in places, as if exposed to impossible heat. And then we found it, the source of the interference. A glowing fracture in the wall. The light wasn't natural. It pulsed like a heartbeat, hues shifting between red and violet. Around it, the air shimmered, distorting the lumen beams. Arlen knelt beside it, scanning with his auspex. Emperor, it's a warp breach. Small, unstable, but real. Can we seal it? I asked. Maybe, he said. But we'd need a psyker or a priest. And both are dead topside. Before anyone could speak again, a sound echoed through the tunnels, like whispering. Thousands of voices speaking at once, each in a language that scraped at the edge of sanity. Medita stepped back. We should go. Now. But the light grew brighter. The crack widened, splitting the wall. From within came a surge of freezing air, the kind that burned the lungs. Shadows twisted across the floor, stretching toward us like grasping fingers. Fall back, I shouted. Arlen threw a frag grenade into the breach. The explosion rocked the tunnel, dust raining down in choking clouds. For a heartbeat, everything went silent. Then came the screaming. Shapes crawled from the rift, not demons fully formed, but fragments. Shadows with too many limbs, mouths where eyes should be. They clung to the walls, hissing, flailing. We opened fire. Lost beams cut through them, burning holes in the dark. But they didn't die. They evaporated, only to reform again. Emperor's mercy. Meditor screamed, swinging his rifle like a club as one of the things lunged at him. It melted against his armor, leaving a smear of frost and blood. He fell, convulsing. Arlen grabbed him, dragging him backward. Go, go. I fired until my power pack overheated. Each burst burned away a piece of the horror. But the air was already alive with whispering. The sound crawled into my skull, words forming just out of reach. I felt it then, not fear, not even hate. Just the weight of something old pressing against reality, trying to remember its shape. We reached the surface in chaos. The hatch slammed shut behind us, Valen and his men pulling it closed with a crash. The seals hissed as they welded it shut. Valen grabbed me by the shoulders. What happened down there? I could barely speak. Warp breach. Small one. It's growing. He didn't hesitate. That sector's off limits. We'll call for bombardment. Sir, Arlen said quietly. We don't have the guns left to hit it. Valen's jaw tightened. Then we'll hold it until we do. That night, we doubled the guard around the manufactorum. The air hummed with power, and none of us could sleep. The faint purple glow from beneath the streets painted everything in ghost light. At one point, Arlen whispered, "You ever wonder why the Emperor still lets us live?" I stared at the horizon, where the fires never stopped burning. Maybe he doesn't notice anymore. He didn't answer. When the first tremor hit just before dawn, I thought it was more artillery. Then the ground split open near the manufactorum gates. And that same violet light poured out. Whatever we had awakened below, it wasn't done with us yet. The fifth day began with the earth screaming. The manufactorum's foundations cracked open like ribs torn apart by unseen hands. Purple fire gushed from the fissures, curling skyward in coils of light that defied gravity. Men shouted prayers and curses alike as the ground beneath them writhed. The warp had found its way through, not a breach anymore, but a wound that bled corruption into the world. Valen rallied the line before panic could set in. All squads, defensive positions. Anything that comes out of that hold dies twice before it touches daylight. The order steadied us, barely. Cadians didn't break easily. But faith and training only went so far when the planet itself turned against you. From the fissure crawled shapes of glass and smoke, limbs that melted and reformed with every breath. They didn't walk. They slid, their movement wrong, their shadows cast in the wrong direction. Target the center mass. Valen shouted. Keep firing until they stop moving. We did. Lost fire filled the air, cutting the horrors apart again and again. But every burst of light only seemed to feed the storm. Arlen stood beside me, firing in perfect rhythm. His expression never changed. Pure focus, pure discipline. He looked more like a weapon than a man. The ground trembled again. The fissure widened. From its depths rose something larger, a shape cloaked in black flame. Its form barely coherent, as though reality struggled to define it. A demon host, maybe, or something older, something forgotten by even the warp. Its voice rolled across the ruins, not through the air, but inside our skulls. You hold the corpse emperor's line still? How long will you burn for a dead god? A few guardsmen faltered, clutching their heads. One screamed and fired wildly into the air before. Valen shot him clean through the skull. Hold the line. Valen bellowed. Faith is stronger than flesh. I believed him. I had to. Heavy bolters thundered. Grenades burst like miniature suns. The demon didn't flinch. Its flames devoured everything that touched them. Then came the thunder of engines. Out of the smoke roared a column of Lehman Russ tanks, Imperial armor, battered but still alive. Their commander's voice echoed over Vox. This is the 143rd Cadian Armored. Reinforcements inbound. The cheer that rose from our ranks was ragged, desperate, but real. The tanks opened fire, shells slamming into the demon's form. Each impact tore pieces from its body, not flesh, but concepts, unraveling like torn parchment. The creature screamed, the sound bending metal and sanity alike. Valen seized the moment. Advance. Push them back. We surged forward. Every guardsman who could still move charged into the smoke, firing until their rifles overheated. Arlen moved beside me, precise as ever, every burst from his long loss cutting through corrupted shapes. We reached the fissure. The heat was unbearable. My armor glowed faintly from exposure. I could feel the pull, the warp calling, promising release. A voice in my head whispered my name. It sounded like my mother, but I knew better. Don't listen, Arlen growled, grabbing my shoulder. His grip brought me back. Together, we planted charges along the fissure's edge. Valen's orders crackled through the Vox. All squads, fall back to safe distance. Detonate on my mark. We ran. The world behind us howled. The ground shook so violently I thought the city would collapse entirely. Then, the detonation. A wall of fire ripped through the manufactorum, blinding in its brilliance. The shock wave threw us off our feet, the sound swallowing everything. When I came to, all I could hear was ringing. The fissure was gone. The ground where it had been was blackened and cracked, still glowing faintly, but sealed. For now, Arlen limped over, blood running down his arm. You alive? Think so, I said. My mouth tasted of copper and ash. Valen stood at the center of it all, helmet off, his face gray with exhaustion, but his eyes sharp. We did it, he said softly. By the throne, we did it. For a brief moment, it almost felt like victory. Then the Vox crackled. Command to all Cadian units. Enemy reinforcements sighted. Multiple warp signatures inbound. Estimated time to contact, 1 hour. Valen looked to the sky. Through the smoke, new lights were descending, not meteors, not drop pods, but something alive. The warp doesn't take defeats kindly, he murmured. That night, the fires burned blue. No one slept. Not because we feared death, that had long since become routine, but because, somewhere beneath the ash and the whispers, the ground still throbbed, like a heartbeat that refused to die. Arlen stared into the dark, his voice quiet. How many times do you think we'll have to kill the same thing before it stays dead? I didn't answer, because I'd started to think the truth, that in this galaxy, nothing ever truly dies. When dawn came again, it wasn't light that woke us. It was the shriek of atmospheric entry. Trader drop pods fell through the ash clouds like blazing meteors, streaking across the horizon. Each one screamed as it tore the sky apart, fire trailing behind in long ribbons. The ground shook with every impact. There was no pause between impacts, just a drumbeat of death, relentless and precise. Valen's voice crackled over the vox. All units, brace for immediate assault. Enemy reinforcements inbound from orbit. Estimated numbers, too damn many. We scrambled to our positions, our bodies running on muscle memory. There was no time to think, no time to pray. The manufactorum was gone, the fissure sealed by fire. But the war had simply shifted to new ground. Arlen checked his long loss, swapping out the damaged power pack. "They're not letting us rest," he said. "They never do," I replied, chambering a fresh cell in my lost gun. "We're Cadian. That's the point." Valen passed by, his voice calm, almost casual. "Keep the Emperor in your hearts, and your sights steady. That's how you make every death count." He moved like a man carved from granite, unbreakable, but chipped by every blow. The first pod landed 300 meters north, slamming into the ruins with a sonic boom that shattered what little glass was left. We opened fire immediately, lost beams streaking through the dust. The pod's doors blew open, and Traitor Astartes emerged, Chaos Marines in armor black as oil and etched with runes that hurt the eyes. "Emperor preserve us," Meditor whispered. "They've sent the Black Legion." Valen didn't hesitate. "All heavy weapons on those Marines. Focus fire. Bring them down before they reach the line." Bolters roared in answer. The enemy's return fire was like thunder. The first salvo tore through 3 guardsmen, leaving nothing but red mist. We fired until our fingers ached. Every lost bolt that struck left a mark, some shallow, some deep. The smell of ozone filled the air. Arlen's shots were perfect, hitting joint seals and lenses. One Chaos Marine stumbled, then fell. It wasn't enough. They advanced through the storm, unstoppable. Valen signaled the flamer teams. "Burn them." Jets of promethium erupted from the flanks, washing the enemy in flame. The fire clung to their armor, burning bright even as they pushed forward. One went down, roaring defiance, his armor cracking under the heat. The second pod landed closer. This one was smaller, and what came out wasn't human. Warp-tainted servitors crawled from the wreckage, their bodies fused with mechanical limbs, eyes glowing with sickly red light. Their saw blades whirred as they advanced, shrieking binary prayers to some corrupted machine god. "Tech corruption," Arlen shouted. "Target the control nodes." We obeyed, focusing our fire. The servitors dropped one by one, their limbs twitching long after they fell. But more were coming. Always more. In the chaos, Valen climbed the rubble to higher ground, waving a signal flare. His voice thundered over the vox. "We are Cadians. We hold. We bleed. We die, but we do not break." Something inside me reignited at those words. The men roared in response, voices raw, echoing through the ruins. We fired harder, faster. The air burned with faith and fury. Then came the heavy silhouette, a corrupted dreadnought, its frame wrapped in chains and flesh. Its voice boomed through a vox grill. "Cadia died long ago. You fight for ashes." Valen spat in the dirt. "Ashes burn just fine." He called in the armor platoon. The Lehman Russes rolled forward, engines roaring. Their cannons fired in unison, the explosions lighting the night. The dreadnought staggered, one arm torn clean off. It screamed, a sound like a dying engine and a soul being ripped apart. But it didn't fall. The thing charged, tearing through the wreckage, striking one of our tanks full force. The impact crushed metal like paper. The vehicle exploded, throwing debris and flame across the line. Arlen and I dove for cover, glass raining down around us. I felt something hot tear across my shoulder, shrapnel. I ignored it, slammed a fresh cell into my lost gun, and fired again. "Keep it distracted," Valen shouted. "Demolition team, move up." The Croc team sprinted forward under cover of fire, their silhouettes flashing in the light of explosions. One fell, 2 kept going. They dove beneath the dreadnought, attaching charges to its undercarriage. Fire in the Emperor's name. The explosion split the air. The dreadnought went up in a tower of flame, its roar dying with the sound of tearing metal. When the smoke cleared, only its charred husk remained. Silence hung over the battlefield for a heartbeat. Then the cheers began, ragged, hollow, but real. Valen didn't smile. "That was just the first wave," he said. "They're testing us." The vox crackled again. Faint but unmistakable. Additional enemy landers detected. North, east, and central sectors. Total count, 3 dozen. "Emperor help you all. We looked to the horizon. Through the smoke, new fire trails streaked downward, dozens of them. Arlen exhaled slowly. Guess we'll get to test our endurance too. Valen reloaded his bolt pistol, expression unreadable. Then let's make the test worth their time. As night fell, the world turned red again. This time not from fire or blood, but from the warp itself. The storms had changed color. The air began to hum. Something massive was coming. And for the first time since the campaign began, I wasn't sure if Cadia's will would be enough to stop it. By the 6th day, the planet itself had gone mad. Warp lightning forked across the sky in veins of green and violet, striking the ruins with unnatural precision. Vox signals came and went in waves of static. The air tasted metallic, every breath heavy with ash and psychic residue. Even the ground vibrated with a heartbeat that wasn't ours. The Emperor's name was on every lip, but fewer believed the words when they said them. Valen's command post was a shattered hab tower overlooking what used to be the manufacturing sector, now a cratered wasteland of molten steel and broken armor. From there, we could see the horizon crawling with enemy movement. Dozens of drop pods had landed through the night. The traders were regrouping, spreading like infection through the city's bones. The Cadian line had fractured into isolated pockets. We weren't an army anymore. We were survivors with rifles. Arlen leaned over a map lit by a flickering lumen globe. They're pushing from 3 directions now: north, east, and under. Under? I asked. He nodded grimly. The Auspex is showing heat signatures below the ruins. Tunnels, maybe. Could be the same ones where we found the warp fissure. Valen rubbed his temples, exhaustion etched into every movement. They're coming through the tunnels again. Emperor, damn it. They're not just fighting, they're digging. The Vox crackled suddenly, a young trooper's voice, panicked and high-pitched. Command, this is Delta 4. Movement beneath our position. Something's tunneling. Then static. Valen didn't wait. Mount up. All units. Reinforce the lower habs. If they're coming from below, we'll greet them with fire. We moved fast, our boots pounding against the fractured ferrocrete as thunder rumbled above. Every breath came with the taste of dust and fear. The lower levels of the hive were worse than the surface. The air was thick with fumes, visibility low. Our lumens flickered against the endless rows of broken machinery and collapsed corridors. That's when we heard it, a deep, rhythmic rumbling, like something enormous dragging itself through the earth. Contacts, Arlen whispered. Not yet, I said, though my finger was already on the trigger. The first breach came seconds later. The ground split apart, and from the dust emerged twisted figures, former guardsmen. Their flesh fused with machinery, their eyes glowing with warp light. Servitor corpses, half men, half machine, all madness. Fire, Valen commanded. The tunnels erupted in chaos. Lost beams seared through the darkness, painting the walls with red light. The abominations surged forward, silent except for the grinding of their metal limbs. Arlen's long lost cracked beside me, each shot hitting dead center. I followed his rhythm, the 2 of us firing as one. Every time one of the things fell, another took its place. They're endless, Meditor shouted, reloading with trembling hands. Valen grabbed a flamer from a fallen trooper and stepped forward. Then let's see if they burn. He unleashed a torrent of promethium, fire washing over the advancing wave. The smell was unbearable, melting flesh, burning oil. But the line held. For now. Then the rumbling returned. The floor behind us split open, and something vast pushed through, a creature of flesh and iron, easily the size of a tank. It had no face, just a mass of cables and bone, with mouths where its joints should be. Back! Fall back! Valen shouted. We retreated into a secondary corridor, firing as we moved. The beast followed, smashing through the walls like paper. Its roar drowned out everything. Arlen tossed a frag grenade. It exploded against the creature's flank, tearing off a chunk of armor. Black ichor splattered the floor, sizzling like acid. Keep hitting it, Valen shouted. Don't stop. But the thing didn't slow. It swung one massive limb, crushing 2 troopers instantly. Their screams were swallowed by the roar of metal. I fired again and again, every shot a prayer. The creature lunged forward, its body splitting open to reveal a writhing core, a pulsing organ surrounded by spinning gears. Valen saw it too. There, that's its heart. He dove forward, igniting the last of the flamer's fuel straight into the open wound. The creature convulsed, its form shuddering. Then it exploded, not in fire, but in sound. A psychic shriek tore through the corridor, throwing us all to the ground. When the noise faded, the beast was gone. Nothing left but charred metal and blood. We regrouped, coughing, bleeding, but alive. "Report," Valen rasped. "Half the squad down," Arlen said. "But the tunnels are clear. For now." Valen leaned against the wall, his armor scorched. "Then we seal them. Collapse every tunnel we can find." We spent hours placing charges, sealing exits, turning the underhive into a tomb. Each detonation echoed like thunder through the ruins. When we finally surfaced, the sky was burning. Lightning danced across the clouds, and high above, something massive moved, a silhouette against the storm. Too large to be a ship, too wrong to be a natural shape. Arlen stared up, his voice hollow. "That's not from orbit." Valen didn't answer. He didn't need to. We all felt it, the shift in the air, the psychic pressure building like a storm about to break. The war wasn't ending. The enemy wasn't retreating. Something else was coming through. And this time, it wouldn't be satisfied with just the city. It began with whispers. Not voices through the vox. Not the usual static of battle, but whispers in our minds. Faint, familiar, persuasive. They sounded like old friends, like family, like every comrade we'd ever lost. At first, I thought it was exhaustion, maybe warp interference. But then Arlen turned to me, eyes wide, and said, "Do you hear them too?" That's when I knew it wasn't just me. We were camped in the upper ruins of what used to be the Hab Towers, watching the horizon burn. The fires of the lower levels still raged from the tunnel demolitions, their light flickering off the storm clouds above. The sky had turned the color of bruised flesh, purples and reds swirling like oil on water. Valen sat apart, helmet off, staring into nothing. His face looked older by decades. The whispers grew stronger. They told us things: where to find water, when to reload, where to aim. Helpful things at first. Then, darker things. Promises. "You could end this," they said. "You could have peace. Just one moment of surrender." I gritted my teeth and prayed, but the words came through even louder. Valen's vox flared to life, breaking the tension. "All squads, report in. Any contact." Static answered. Then a single voice, one I didn't recognize. "We are with you, Commander Valen. We see the truth now. The Emperor is dead." Arlen froze. That wasn't one of ours. Valen's expression hardened. It was once. He stood, slamming a fresh cell into his bolt pistol. "They're turning our own men." The whispers laughed, a sound like wind through broken glass. Moments later, lost fire erupted from the shadows below. Blue streaks of energy cut through the dust. Guardsmen, our guardsmen, emerged from the ruins, eyes burning with warp light. Valen didn't hesitate. "Hold the line. They are fallen." The firefight was chaos. We shot at silhouettes that had once been brothers. Voices we recognized screaming blasphemies through the haze. One of them, Trooper Havoc, a kid who'd shared rations with me on the first day, charged through the smoke with a bayonet fixed, screaming my name. I didn't think. I fired point blank. He fell, still whispering even as he died. Arlen reloaded beside me, muttering, "They were ours. Emperor, forgive us." Valen barked back, "They aren't ours anymore." We drove them back, inch by inch, until the last of them fell silent. The ruins stank of scorched flesh and ozone. When it was over, Valen gathered what was left of us, less than 24 now. "They're inside the city," he said quietly. "Not just the traitors. Something else. It's using our dead, our thoughts." He looked at me. "You felt it, didn't you?" I nodded. "It spoke to me. It knew my name." Valen's jaw clenched. "Then it's close. Warp entities don't whisper unless they're feeding." We rearmed in silence. No one prayed. No one dared. A rumble shook the ruins, deep and drawn out, as if the ground itself were exhaling. Then a light, cold and blue, began to pulse from the center of the city. "The fissure," Arlen whispered. "We sealed it, but it's opening again." Valen's eyes blazed with sudden fury. "No, not while I still breathe." We moved as one, descending through the wreckage toward the source. Every step was harder than the last. The air thickened, gravity seemed heavier. The whispers returned, louder now, overlapping into a We advanced cautiously, lost guns ready. Through the smoke, we saw figures, imperial uniforms, tattered and dirty. A handful of survivors. They waved when they saw us. Relief surged through me. Then I saw their eyes. Too bright. Too calm. Hold, I shouted. Weapons down. They didn't stop. They just smiled and kept walking. Arlen fired first. The shot took one in the chest. The wound sizzled. And instead of blood, warp light poured out. The others screamed, their bodies distorting, skin melting into the air. Demons in disguise. Valen's voice roared through the Vox. Burn them all. Flamer teams unleashed torrents of fire. The false guardsmen shrieked as their forms melted away, revealing the horrors beneath, skeletal things with blade-like limbs, wearing our faces like masks. The flames reflected in Valen's visor as he shouted over the roar. See what faith hides you from, man. See what the Emperor protects you against. But even his fury couldn't hide the truth. We were losing ground. Every encounter drained us further. Every victory left fewer to fight. That night, we gathered around a dying campfire in the ruins of a basilica. The Emperor's statues were headless. The stained glass melted into streaks of red and gold. Valen sat apart, cleaning his knife, the same blade he'd driven into the demon. The metal still shimmered faintly with warp burn. Arlen spoke softly. He hasn't slept in 2 days. None of us have, I said. He shook his head. It's different for him. He's not just tired. He's listening. I frowned. Listening to what? Arlen didn't answer, but we both heard it then. A faint hum, deep and rhythmic. It wasn't the storm. It was coming from Valen. From his knife. The commander's voice cut through the silence. It speaks to me. We froze. I hear it, he continued. The demon. It's still here. It wants me to know its name. Sir, that's warp taint, I said carefully. You need to. He looked up, eyes hard. I know what it is, trooper. But if it speaks, I can learn. If I learn, I can kill it. His logic was pure Cadian, mad, brave, and somehow both at once. Before anyone could argue, the Vox crackled with static, then a voice, sharp and urgent. Imperial command to any surviving Cadian units. Reinforcements inbound. Heavy armor division approaching from orbit. Hold your positions. Hope flared in my chest like a flare. Valen looked toward the storm. They're late, but they came. Are they real? Arlen asked quietly. Valen smiled grimly. We'll find out soon enough. By dawn, the horizon was alive with motion. From the storm's edge descended dropships, massive, angular silhouettes breaking through the clouds. The roar of engines shook the air. Saints above, Meteor whispered. They made it. But then the first ship tilted. Its engines flared too bright. The descent became a fall. It crashed into the city's outer ring, erupting into a fireball that lit the ruins like a second sun. The Vox filled with screams, humanat. First, then something else. Arlen's face went pale. They didn't make it through the storm. Another ship came down, slower this time. Engines sputtering, but the warp had twisted its path. It veered off course and crashed into the mountains beyond the city. Only one made it through the clouds intact. It hovered above the ruins, thrusters stabilizing, dropping metallic pods into the streets below. Valen lifted his scope. His face hardened. They're not Imperial colors. Through the lens, I saw it too. Black armor, crimson trim. The mark of the eye on their shoulders. The reinforcements weren't ours. The Black Legion had returned. Valen lowered the scope, his voice cold as steel. Then this is it. The ground shook as the first pod landed. From the smoke emerged figures in power armor, their horns glinting under the stormlight. The leader's armor bore the mark of Abaddon himself, a trophy of 1,000 worlds. He raised his weapon, voice booming like thunder. Cadians, you still resist. Admirable. Futile, but admirable. Valen stood his ground. You've made a mistake coming here. The Chaos Lord laughed. We made Cadia fall once. We'll make its ghosts bow twice. Valen turned to us, eyes fierce. Form the line. And in that moment, I saw the last light of Cadia burn in him, pure, defiant, unyielding. We aimed our weapons as the enemy advanced. No retreat, no surrender, only the line. Again, always. The world ended for the second time that morning. The Chaos Lord's advance was methodical, precise, confident. His warriors fanned out through the ruins, moving with the discipline of veterans who had butchered 1,000 armies before ours. Each step of their armored boots shook the ground, the sound echoing through the shattered streets like the tolling of a funeral bell. Valen stood at the center of our line, cloak torn, eyes burning behind his visor. The Vox whispered fragments of prayers, some from us, some from ghosts. "Hold until they break," he ordered. "Then we push." There was no strategy left, no fallback positions, no reinforcements. Just courage, weaponized stubbornness forged by Cadia itself. The first volley came from us. Lost fire streaked through the haze. Thousands of crimson lances converging on the enemy. The beams flared off ceramite like rain-off armor, but we kept firing. Every bolt, every scream of our guns was defiance made manifest. Then the Black Legion returned fire. Bolter rounds slammed into our line, detonations ripping men apart. The air filled with dirt, smoke, and screams. Meteor went down first, half his torso simply gone. Arlen dragged him back behind cover, shouting for a medic who wasn't there. "Keep shooting," Valen roared. "For every one of us that falls, 10 of them pay in blood." He climbed the rubble, firing his bolt pistol one-handed, each shot finding a mark. One Chaos Marine's helmet shattered. Another's knee joint exploded under the impact. Valen fought like a man possessed, or perhaps blessed. Every movement precise, every word a hammer. "Still with us in the dark?" he shouted over the Vox. "Then fight, damn you! Fight!" His fury was contagious. We rose from cover and fired again, even as their return volleys tore men apart. Arlen's voice came through the static. "Left flank collapsing. We need armor." Valen didn't hesitate. "Then be armor." He signaled the heavy weapon team. They brought the autocannon to bear, setting it atop a mound of corpses for elevation. The weapon screamed as it unleashed round after round, the recoil shaking the earth. Chaos Marines staggered under the barrage. One went down, then another. But the Lord himself, he didn't even flinch. He advanced through the storm of fire, his armor reflecting the lightning above. His weapon, a demon-forged glaive, humming with barely restrained power. Each step left scorch marks on the ground. Valen saw him and knew what was coming. "Arlen, cover me." "Sir, no." But Valen was already moving. He charged straight into the chaos, vaulting over rubble and bodies alike, firing as he ran. The Lord turned toward him, laughter rumbling from within his helmet. "Another mortal with delusions of glory," the traitor sneered. Valen's pistol barked twice. The shot struck home, not enough to kill, but enough to get the monster's attention. They clashed in the center of the battlefield, bolt pistol against demon blade. Sparks erupted with every strike, the sound like thunder on stone. "Cadia stands," Valen spat. "Even in death." The Lord swung wide, his glaive cutting through a wall of rubble. Valen ducked, countered, and drove his knife into a gap in the armor. The blade hissed as it met flesh. The Chaos Lord roared, backhanding Valen with enough force to send him flying. His body hit the ground hard, but he rose again, blood streaming from his mouth. "Arlen," he gasped over the Vox. Now, from the ruins above, Arlen's shot rang out. The long-lost beam hit the Lord square in the helm, cracking it open with a blinding flash. The Chaos Warrior staggered, enraged. Valen charged again. He drove his knife, the demon-tainted blade, deep into the open wound. The weapon screamed, a psychic wail that echoed across the battlefield. The Lord convulsed, his armor fracturing under the pressure of its own corruption. "For Cadia," Valen bellowed. The Chaos Lord's body erupted in a burst of warp light, a miniature nova that threw us all to the ground. When the dust settled, nothing remained of him but smoking armor, and Valen, kneeling, his knife buried in the dirt. The line went silent. For one moment, even the warp held its breath. Then the rest of the Black Legion howled and charged. We had seconds. Arlen dragged Valen back behind cover, shouting, "He's alive! Commander's alive!" Valen's eyes flickered open. The knife still glowed in his hand, its edge now marked with fresh runes, dark, pulsing, alive. "It's not over," he whispered. "They're bound to him. If we hold, they'll fade when he does." We formed up around him, every survivor firing as the traitors closed in. Bolter shells rained down, lost fire blazed back. The ruins shook with the fury of it all. The enemy reached our line, and we met them with bayonets and faith. I don't remember how long the fighting lasted. Minutes, hours, a lifetime. All I remember is the heat, the smoke, the smell of blood. and Valen's voice carried through the chaos. Cadia does not die. When it ended, the battlefield was quiet again. The Black Legion were gone, not dead, but retreating, their forms fading into the storm as if dissolving back into the warp. We stood among the wreckage, too numb to cheer, too tired to weep. Valen looked toward the fissure in the distance, now pulsing brighter than ever. "That was their champion," he said. "The rest will follow." Then the ground trembled. The fissure split wide open, light pouring from it like liquid fire. Whatever had been waiting behind the veil was stepping through. And this time, we didn't have a commander to save us, because Valen's eyes were still glowing, and he was smiling. When dawn came again, it wasn't fire that painted the sky, it was ash. The storm had finally broken. The air was heavy but still. The ruins of the city smoked quietly beneath a pale, sickly light. We were all that remained. 7 of us. 7 out of hundreds. Arlen and I walked through what had once been the command plaza. Every step crunched on glass, bone, and fragments of shattered armor. In the distance, the black knife still stood embedded in the earthware. Valen had fallen, a monument to his final defiance. The air around it shimmered faintly, the warp's residue clinging to reality like oil on water. "Do we bury him?" Arlen asked quietly. I shook my head. "You don't bury men like Valen. You remember them." He nodded. "Then we remember." For hours we searched for survivors. We found none. Only corpses, some too twisted to recognize. The enemy had been obliterated in the final blast. Their black armor melted into the stone. The smell of burnt ceramite filled the air. Meditor found a functioning Vox unit, half melted but still humming faintly. He cleaned the soot from the receiver and handed it to me. "You're ranking now," he said. I stared at the dead device. "There's no one left to report to." He gave a half smile. "Then report to the stars." I pressed the transmit rune. Static hissed, then cleared slightly. I took a breath. "This is Trooper Garin Hale, 182nd Cadian. Reporting. Victory. Partial. The city is lost. The enemy is gone." And Commander Valen held the line. The words came out rough, but steady. "If anyone hears this, know that Cadia stands. Not in stone, not in name, but in will." I released the transmit rune. The Vox clicked off, its light fading. The silence that followed was almost peaceful. We set up a small camp near the knife, using what supplies remained. No one spoke much. Arlen stared into the distance, lost in thought. Meditor cleaned his weapon for the 10th time, hands trembling slightly. As night fell, I found myself drawn toward the knife. It hummed softly, not in sound, but in vibration, like the echo of a heartbeat. The black metal was warm to the touch. For a moment, I thought I saw a reflection within the blade, Valen's face. Calm and resolute. Then it was gone. Arlen joined me, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think he knew? That it would take him too?" "Yes," I said. "And he chose it anyway." He nodded, eyes distant. "That's what makes it Cadian." We stood there for a long while, the fire crackling behind us, the city's ruins glowing faintly under the twin moons. Later that night, I dreamed. I saw Valen standing in a field of white dust, his armor unbroken, his knife at his side. Behind him stretched the ruins of 1,000 worlds, and before him, the stars. He looked back once, just long enough to speak. "Keep watching the line, Trooper. Someone always must." When I awoke, the storm had returned, faint this time, distant, like a memory of thunder. The knife still stood, but the hum had stopped. We packed what little we had and began the long walk toward the mountains. There might be an evac point there, or another Imperial signal. Maybe even hope. As we walked, I looked back one last time. The ruins of the city were nothing but shadow and dust now, but for a brief moment. As the wind shifted, I could almost swear. I saw a shape in the smoke, a man standing tall with a bolt pistol at his side, watching us go. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe not. Either way, I saluted. Because on that dead world, hope still stood, burned, battered, but unbroken. And as long as one Cadian drew breath, so would Cadia. In the end, the war for that world was just another forgotten battle in the endless ledger of the 41st millennium. Command would never hear our report. The names of the fallen would vanish beneath new campaigns, new fronts, new horrors. But for those who survived, and for those who didn't, the truth was clear. Cadia never died. It was never just a fortress or a world. It was a promise, carved into the souls of its people, a defiance that even the warp itself could not erase. The Imperium breeds soldiers by the billions, but only Cadians are born staring into the abyss and refusing to blink. They do not fight for glory. They fight because there is no one else who will. Valen's sacrifice sealed the wound, but his legacy sealed something greater, the understanding that the Emperor's light doesn't need to shine. It needs only to endure. Arlen, Meteor, and I would carry that light forward. Through every new deployment, every dying world. Wherever the Guard fights, Cadia fights. And wherever Cadia fights, humanity remembers what it means to stand. So if you ever hear a voice on a broken vox, faint beneath the static, whispering, Cadia stands, know that somehow it's still true. Because as long as one Guardsman remembers, one heart beats, one finger pulls a trigger in his name, the line holds. Always. The Emperor protects. More stories await.